So welcome everybody to our class number 10, as Rabbi J mentioned. And because this week is Asar B'Tevet, there's two elements of Asar B'Tevet that have to do with our time period. One is what happened on Asar B'Tevet itself in the book of Yechezkel. I doubt if we'll get that far today. We might if we have a chance. But Asar B'Tevet is one of the 4 fast days on Yerushalayim. And the 4 fast days has everything to do with our time period. So because we're talking about the biblical text of the Second Temple period, and we just had a class on Chagai and Zechariah, I want to show you how our study of Chagai and Zechariah will help us appreciate in tremendous depth the idea of the 4 fast days to this day. I'm assuming everyone's heard of this concept of 4 fast days. And what do they all share in common, the 4 fast days? Other than the fact that they're fast days, what theme do they all share in common? I'm sure everyone knows. They all have to do with the destruction of Yerushalayim of the First Temple period. It could be that the Second Temple was also destroyed on Tisha B'Av, but they were originally instituted when the First Temple was destroyed. So I'll go in historical order. The 10th of Tevet marks the date that the siege of Jerusalem was laid in the 9th year of Tzidkiel, a year and a half before the temple was destroyed. A little more than a year later, in the 11th year of Tzidkiel, in the 4th month, the city walls are breached. That's what we call Shivas of Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz. That's fast number 2. Then we have Tisha B'Av, which in Tanakh is either the 7th of Av or 10th of Av. I guess it was a long process but we mark it on the 9th of Av. That's when the temple itself was destroyed. And then we have the story of Tzum Gedalia, which most likely was a couple months later. It was definitely in the beginning of Tishrei. Was it that year or a year later? People argue, but that was the final event. So all 4 fast days, again, Asar B'Tevet, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av, and Tzum Gedalia, they all relate to the end of the First Temple period. Now, the question is going to be, number one, why were they instituted? And what we're going to study today is a very interesting story that during the time of Daryavesh, as they're breaking ground on the Second Temple and started its construction, there's going to be an interesting question being sent from the exile and the diaspora. Is there any need to continue fasting now that the temple is being rebuilt? Just a quick modern day application. After the 6-Day War, there was a very similar question that came up. In fact, it was discussed in depth after the 6-Day War. Is there need to continue fasting on Tisha B'Av after the 6-Day War? Remember, the 6-Day War was Shavuos time in June, and was only a month or 2 before the 17th of Tammuz in Tisha B'Av. And that was a big question. Now that we've regained the old city and we have the Temple Mount in our hands, is there any need to fast anymore? Of course, we continue fasting. So some people say, because we continued fasting, that's why the temple wasn't rebuilt. And some people say, because the temple wasn't rebuilt, we continue fasting. You understand the 2 different approaches? I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying it was a very, you can see 2 different ways of hashkafot or Weltanschauungs of how to look at current events. That was just a word of opening, and I was just stalling till everyone logged in, and we went from 60 to 90 in my 5-minute stall. Okay, so now we'll start the class. What I need to do first, I need to do a quick review of the time period, because I'm assuming people don't remember everything, and it was only a week ago, it was 2 weeks ago we discussed this. So I'm going to share my screen, and today's share is going to start with a quick little review. Okay, this is our King Cyrus and the 4 fast days in light of Zechariah. That's supposed to be a pun. Remember that last week we talked about Zechariah's menorah. So in light of Zechariah and Hanukkah, it's always the week after Hanukkah. And we're going to review the timeline of the key events that we're talking about. So I'm going to use the BCE and the classic dating. It's not for people should not be confused. So the Babylonian Empire, the 7 years of Babel that we talked about so many times before, that's in 605 BCE, which was the 4th year of Yehoiakim. 7-8 years later is the first wave of exile, Galut Yehoiachin. That's the group of people who go to exile before the temple is destroyed. They go with Yechezkel. On the 10th of Tevet, in the 9th year of Tzidkiel, or 9 years after the first wave of exile, is when the siege begins. That's in 588 BCE. 586, a year and a half later, the temple is destroyed, Galut Tzidkiel. And now what's important for our share is the center of the Jewish people now moves to Babylonia. there are a few people left, and even they go down to Egypt at the end of Yirmiyahu. And as far as Tanakh is concerned, there's no longer a Jewish presence in the Holy Land for about 50 some years. The Persians take over the Babylonian Empire in 537, 538. You can argue here and there, but that's the famous Cyrus decree. Koresh comes into power and takes over Babylonia around 537, gives this decree, allowing the Jews to return. He dies in 530. Cambyses takes over, but even though he gave them the right to build, what we talked about in our study of Ezra, again, after Cambyses was Darius, that's the time period of our shir today, then comes Xerxes, and we're not going to get into the Persian time period. We're just going to focus today on the early years of the reign of Darius, of King Darius, which relates to our Nevuah today. Why? Because when we studied over the last several weeks, last month or two, we talked about the Cyrus declaration coming after he comes into power. In year 2, when they return, they begin construction of the temple, but it stopped as soon as they begin because of local population. We call that the first Intifada. Then there was a gap, and that gap was based on what we saw in the book of Ezra in chapter 4, that the local population didn't want us building, they didn't get along with us, and they wrote letters and hate letters back and forth, and everything stopped until the second year of Darius, which was about 18 years later. In the second year of Darius, that's why I'm having this highlighted, that was our Hanukkah shir. In the book of Haggai, we found out they broke ground on the temple on the 24th or 25th of Kislev in the second year of Darius. And we saw in the book of Ezra that construction was completed in year 6, which good, that's in chapter 6 of Ezra, was year 6 of Darius. And there we found that construction was finally finished. It took 4 some years to finish it on the 3rd of Adar. Our topic today is going to be year 4 of Darius. And all the background we did is critical to understand this, because in year 4 of Darius, we're going to find a letter being sent from the exile to the rabbis in Jerusalem, asking them the famous question, is there any point in fasting anymore now that the temple is under construction? We're going to read that soon. Again, after Darius in our shir, there's another gap to our Tachshasta, but I'm purposely skipping that today. I want to focus only on these 4 years, from the time they build, from the time they break ground on the temple, Hanukkah, year 2 of Darius, until year 6 of Darius, when it's completed. We're smack in the middle. I'm assuming the construction has started. They have what's called the sheled, the skeleton of the building is up, but there's a lot of work still to be done. And they're probably still raising funds, and everyone else wants someone else to donate. Now, so I have everything here in Hebrew, but I think you'd probably rather see the English translation as we read. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the book of Zechariah. I just want to begin with a quick reminder. In Zechariah Perek Bet, which was in year 2 of Darius, the Haftarah that we read on Shabbat Chanukah, Roni v'simchi bat Zion, the Navi was telling the people, be happy. Don't be sad, because I'm coming, God says. I'm going to bring my Shekhinah back. The divine presence will return. And other nations, remember this. V'nivu goyim rabim el Hashem b'yomahu. When my Shekhinah comes back, then other nations will be able to come to visit. It's not just that you're going to have a temple. Hopefully you'll have a temple and you'll be in a position that other nations look up to you. And you'll be my people. I'll be your God and I'll dwell among you. And then everyone will know that it's our God who's behind all these events and everything we talked about, the beginning of the redemption process, what we called Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, the beginning of our redemption in the beginning of the Second Temple period. Now we're going to go to Zechariah, and I'm going to switch now to an English Tanakh. I'll stop this year, and we'll go to a nice English one, side by side, so we can all read together. The next 15, 20 minutes this year, we're simply going to learn Zechariah Perek Zayin. If you have a Tanakh at home you want to follow, it's just as good, but we'll pick up the key points. Let me get a little annotator so we can follow with the spotlight. Okay. Where are we? Year 4, that means they broke ground 2 years beforehand, and they have 2 years till they finish. And notice again, another Nevuah in the month of Kislev. It's exactly 2 years since they broke ground, and a little less than 2 years until they finish, because they'll finish in the month of Adar. Actually, a little more than 2 years till they finish in the month of Adar. Now, this is a tricky pasuk. Vaishlach Beit El Sar Etze v'regem melech v'anashav v'lachalot et pnei Hashem. Now, is Beit El the name of a person or where they're sending to? In other words, there's a group, we'll skip the word Beit El for now. I'll follow the translation that they sent to Beit El, to the house of God, or it could be someone's name. Beit El might be someone's name, a nice name for someone who misses Jerusalem, named in Babel in the meantime. But these names are for sure Babylonian names of Jews. Sar Etzer and Regem Melech Vanashav, there's a group of people who are sending a message to Yerushalayim, Lachalot et Pnei Hashem, to ask God a question. What's the question they're asking? I'd like to call this the first responsa. If you know what shutim are, shedlit and shuvot, I think this is the first example of a responsa, not just a response where someone asks a question, but where someone asks a question to a rabbi or a high authority, and that authority gives an answer where it's not simply answering that question, but that question becomes, or the answer to that question becomes a foundation point from which other laws are going to be derived. As we're going to set basically a halachic principle based on their answer. So let's understand first the question. Lemor el hakohanim asher lebeit Hashem tzvot, ve'el hanavim lemor. It's a question, notice, not just to the priests, but also to the prophets. The prophets, again, are Haggai and Zechariah. The Kohanim is Yeshua Kohen Gadol. What are they asking them? Ha'efkeh b'chodesh ha'chamishi. Hi nazer kasher asiti zeh kamesh shanim. What's that mean? Should we continue crying in the 5th month? Should we hold ourselves back or limit what we're doing? Like, remember, a Nazir doesn't drink wine. As I've done so many years, how many years we'll see in a minute, it's been almost 70 years. Meaning, we see from here that there's been a custom to fast in the 5th month. That's the source of Tisha B'Av. Here we see clearly that Tisha B'Av was a fast day. And they've been fasting since the temple was destroyed. And they've been fasting in Babylonia. And the question, why are they fasting? Are they fasting to remember what happened or why it happened? I'll repeat that to make sure it's clear. There's no doubt there's a fast day. And a fast day was instituted to mark that date. The temple's destruction was a catastrophe. But are they fasting to remember what happened? Or are they fasting to remember why it happened? And we'll return to this as the show continues. Now, this is one of my favorite answers to a question. This is like classic rabbinic answer. Now, notice they came to ask the Kohanim and the Nevi'im, and now God intervenes. They're not saying ask God, they're asking the Kohanim and Nevi'im. The Nevi'im turn to God and ask, what should we tell them? Because the Nevi'im aren't sure. Sometimes you ask a question to a Nevi or Kohen, he doesn't need to ask God because the answer is simple. This is a complicated question. Do we continue fasting or not? And a Navi is God's spokesperson. Now, before I get to the answer, based on our studies so far, I want to give 2 different ways of understanding the question. They might be asking in year 2, is this really happening? Meaning, is construction really finished? And if it's finished, then of course we don't fast. This might be a technical question. I'll explain what I mean. It could be the assumption is, if the temple is completed, then for sure we don't fast. And in essence, what they're asking is it really happening? Because we've been disappointed before. Remember, we came back in Koresh, they started, it stopped. It's the same thing going to happen again. I'll give you a really bad example for my son, who has a bad sense of humor like his father. So Friday night, the chicken comes out, and he says, oh, Ima, that looks so good. I can't wait to be disappointed. I hope you understand it was just a joke. But understand the point? Sometimes he gets so used to being disappointed, they started giving up on things. So what I'm suggesting is that they might be asking, is this going to be simply another disappointment? Remember we talked about how they're down and depressed all the time? All those people came back in the time of Koresh. So they were all excited they came, and it fizzled out. Remember? There was that building freeze for almost 20 years. They got started again. It's taking a long time. It's been 2 years since they started. Nothing's happened yet. It's not finished yet. Are they asking, is it really going to happen? But if it does happen, then for sure we wouldn't fast. Or are they assuming that it's happening and it's almost done, and assuming the temple is being built and it's going to be done soon? Now that it's done, is there a need to fast? In other words, are they asking a technical question of whether is it really happening? Or are they asking a fundamental question Is there a religious point in fasting once the temple is rebuilt? Now, if you're fasting, remember what happened, then once it's rebuilt, okay, there's nothing to fast for anymore. If I'm fasting, remember why it happened, then there might be even a reason to fast even after it's finished. Okay, so that's my background. Now let's get to work. And this is a classic Jewish custom. When someone asks you a question, you answer the question with another question. And more like kolam aretz, go tell the people of the land. Ama aretz, in fact, does not mean the foolish people. It means the landowners or the people of the land. Tell all the people, and elakonim, and to the priests as well. Notice the Nevi'im are giving the answer. The question came to the Kohanim and Nevi'im. The Nevi'im have to give the answer to the people and the Kohanim, because the Kohanim didn't know the answer, because they had to turn to God, so they went to the Nevi'im. So go to the people and the Kohanim saying, Ki tzamtem v'savod b'chamishi v'ashvi'i v'zeh shivim shana atzom tzamtuni ani? That's a question. That's a great Jewish answer. And it's a sharp answer. It's a rhetorical answer. Saying, go tell the people, when you've been fasting and lamenting in the 5th month and 7th month, now we see 2 fast days, Tisha B'Av and Tzum Gedalia. You've been fasting for the last 70 years on the 5th month and 7th month. Have I been fasting? What's saying is, I'll translate this question to simple English. God's saying, don't ask me the Rabbanans, ask me the Oraitas. I'll explain what I meant. Who decided to fast? It doesn't say in the Torah to fast on Tisha B'Av or on Tzum Gedalia. You decided, the Jewish people in exile, you started this custom of fasting. If I commanded you to fast, then you can ask me. So come to God with the D'Oraita. Come to God if you have a question about what's the meaning of a biblical law. But if there's a rabbinic law that you instituted, ask your rabbis, don't ask God. So God's saying, basically, don't ask me stupid questions. Not stupid, don't ask me not relevant questions. Ask somebody else, don't ask me. You're coming to God with a question, then ask your local rabbi. You decided, you and Bavel, you decided to fast. That's your problem. You want to, it's up to you. But don't ask me. He says, God says, have I been fasting? When you eat and drink, I don't command you to eat and drink. You decide when you eat and drink, and you decide when you fast. God's saying, leave me alone with these stupid questions. Not a stupid question, but it's not relevant to God. But now that you're asking a question, here's what you should have asked. And this every good Rosh Yeshiva knows, or any good teacher knows. When a student comes with a question, but the question's not appropriate, but at least asking a question, here's what you should have asked. Understand? Now he gives it. Now he gives it to him. Halo et hadvarim. This is God's answer now for the Nevi'im to tell the people. Halo et hadvarim asher kara Hashem biyad hanevim harishonim biyot Yerushalayim yoshevet ushleva v'arev usvivatea v'anegeb hashvei lo yoshev. What should you tell the people? Dvarim are not words. Dvarim is rebuke. Remember, Hosea kochi mechem dvarim v'shuva al Hashem. Dvarim is many times means rebuke. That's machloket between Rashi and Ramban. Eila had dvarim. The opening line of Sefer Dvarim are these words of rebuke of Moshe, or these commandments that Moshe is giving. But dvarim many times means rebuke. Again, remember in Shabbat Shuvah, kui machem dvarim v'shuva al Hashem. Take words of rebuke and return to God. So it says, give the same rebuke that God called upon you during the Nevi'im. Now, what we call Nevi'im Achronim, Zechariah is calling Nevi'im Rishonim. Right? The earlier prophets, he's referring to, we'll see in a minute, is he referring to Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel, or is he referring to Yeshayahu? Or both, we'll see. But he says, take the same words of rebuke of the prophets who were still living when the first temple was still around. When Yerushalayim was settled and quiet, and its cities all settled and fine, the Stalt and the Shvela and the lowlands. When Israel was sitting pretty. I want to take this back to the time of Uziel, if you know the time period, the beginning of the book of Yeshayahu. During the reign of Uziel, Israel's doing great. We're an empire. Our borders are full. We're prosperous. We're doing great. And Isaiah says this could be a messianic time period. That's chapter 2 in Isaiah. But because of your haughtiness and prosperity, God's going to take that all away from you if you don't fix your ways. If you don't use your prosperity properly and you don't do justice and righteousness, you're going to lose all that. The people don't listen. And as their punishment, God brings in the Assyrians. We reached a similar situation during the reign of Yoshiel. Not as great, but pretty good. And then God warns the people, Yirmiyahu is going to warn the people, fix your ways, fix your society. If not, I'm going to bring in the Babylonians. They don't listen, and they came. So what's God saying? He's saying what we said before, that you're not, if you're fasting already, if you're fasting, remember what happened. Okay, it's being built. If you're fasting, remember why it happened. Or basically, I'll go back a step. If you want to know, is this going to work? Is this really redemption? Are you asking this? Is this Reshit Smechat Golotenu? Is this really going to? Is the temple going to be rebuilt, or are we going to return to prosperity and sovereignty? It's not up to God. It's up to you. That's our question. They're asking God what's going to be in the future, and God's answer is, don't ask God, ask yourselves. But if you want to know what it'll be, there's a reason it was destroyed. When everything was fine, the Jerusalem didn't have to be destroyed had you followed God properly when things were good. Why was the temple destroyed? Because you didn't heed the rebuke of your prophets. Now, if you heed the rebuke and just remember what you did wrong, remember what caused it to be destroyed. And if you remember what caused it to be destroyed and don't repeat the mistakes, there's no reason for it to be destroyed again. So basically what God is telling them is, don't ask me about fasting. You're not fasting, remember what happened. You're fasting, you should be fasting, remember why it happened. And if you want to make sure this is going to be the real thing and it's going to remain, it's up to you, it's not up to God. The Jewish history is not predetermined. It's a destiny, it's what can be, not what will be, and it's in your hands. And therefore, because probably not everyone understood it the way I just explained it, I'm explaining it based on the continuation. So now Zechariah has to clarify what he meant. Now he's going to throw the book at them. Now I'm going to stop the share for a minute so you don't peek ahead. If someone asked you, why was the first temple destroyed? What answer would you have given? Put it this: ask your classic, I'm going to say Rosh Yeshiva, ask your classic rabbi. Why was the first temple destroyed? What's the classic answer everybody gives?
Avodah Zarah, Shfichut Damim,
and Gilui Arayot. Three.
Gilui Arayot, right.
Okay. That's the Gemara in Yoma, Daf Tet. What was the reason for the big three? There was idolatry. It's idol worship. Number two was Arayot. What do you say Arayot in English? What's the word for Arayot? Illicit sexual.
Illicit relationships.
Immorality.
You can guess what that means. That's basically chapter 18 in the book of Vayikra. It's it's incest and things like that. That's that, and murder, the big three. But we're going to see Zechariah doesn't mention those at all. I mean, rarely mentions them. And if you read the book of Yirmiyahu, we're going to see that's not the reason either. That was the reason for the Gzar Din of Churban in the time of Menachem. That's a separate share. We can maybe dedicate a share to it later on. But we're going to see the reason why Menachem was sent into exile when the reason Ashur came in, and that was in the time of Menachem, things were bad because of the big three. When the temple was being destroyed in the time of Yirmiyahu, it wasn't for the big three. And all you have to do is read Yirmiyahu to find it, and Zechariah will be a proof of it. Let's see what Zechariah says, why the temple was destroyed. I would basically say, if you would ask Rabbi Kalman, this is the answer he would have given. You've been following Torah in Motion series, or almost every Dvar Torah he has. Here's the answer Zechariah gives. If you want the temple to remain, what do you need to do? Here's what you need to do. Fasting, that's up to you. If you're fasting, remember, here's what's necessary for this one to remain. Mishpat emet shvotu. Not only do justice, but do justice with truth. Mishpat emet shvotu. V'chesed v'rachamim asu ish tachiv. And don't only do justice and mishpat, but also do chesed and be merciful with one another. It's not, remember, stone was just mishpat without tzedakah. You need mishpat and righteousness and chesed and mercy. Emulate God. Okay. And on top of that, almana yatom v'ger ani al tashoku. Don't oppress the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and the poor. Don't oppress them, even though it might be legal. V'rat ish achiv al takshu v'avachem. Okay, that's a new one. Don't think bad thoughts about your friend, your neighbor. In other words, you can. It's called the blame game or whatever. There's a frame of mind that some people have. I don't want to associate it to any area of population, but there's a lifestyle where people are always, what's wrong with them? The frame of mind is what's wrong with something else. They're always saying, what's he up to? Their default state is they're always assuming someone's out to get them or someone's up to something. But they never think about themselves that way. They think about others that way. Oh, he's no good. That's no good. That's not good. Instead of looking for the good in other people, they're only looking for the bad in them. So don't think badly about your brethren. Don't assume they're doing bad things. Don't think badly about them, and then think positively about them. So he says, that's a way of life already. Now, what's he saying? This is what the prophets at the end of the first temple period warned you. What happened? By Manu Lakshid, the people did not listen. By Nu Katef Soreret, they put up a cold shoulder. Time out. In Israel, the mifsa of putting the vaccinations out, they gave a code name to this whole, what's a mifsa in English? Program, mifsa?
Operation.
The operation doing it, they named the operation Ten Katef, or Tenu Katef. Means, in Hebrew, it means, give your shoulder, means Tenu Katef. Remember, B'nai Kat, B'Katef Yisrael, they carry on their shoulders? Someone carrying something on their shoulder in Hebrew means joining in and helping. So the name of the operation is called Tenu Katef. Understand why? Because you get the vaccination in your shoulder. So therefore, they named the operation Tenu Katef. That was something cute. Now back to the share. So what's he saying? You didn't listen to me, and you put up a cold shoulder, a stubborn shoulder, and you made your ears too hard to listen. That's a pasuk in Yeshaya. I'll show you that later on. You didn't listen to the rebuke. V'libam shamir. They made their hearts like a hard stone. You can't be cut. Mishmo et Torah vet hadvarim asher shalach Hashem tzvot berucho b'yad hanavim harishonim v'yiketzev gadol beit Hashem tzvot. They didn't listen to what? Not just to the instruction of the Kohanim, but also the rebuke, the dvarim which God sent through His Nevi'im with His Ruach. Remember we saw Lo b'chad b'lochav kim beruchi. God sent a message through His Nevi'im. This is Ruach of Hashem with His Nevi'im, with the Nevi'im Rishonim. That's Yirmiyahu, Yeshayahu, the ones we talked about. And that's why there was great anger of God against the people of Israel. And therefore, he explains, Vahi kasher kara v'lo shameu, just like I called upon them to listen and obey me and fix their ways and fix their society, ken yikru v'lo eshma amar Hashem tzvot. That's why I did not answer their prayer. We're going to see at the end of the first temple period, the people prayed to God left and right, save us from the Babylonians, help us in war, save our city. They're davening in the Beit HaMikdash, we'll see in Yirmiyahu very soon. They're praying to God with their full hearts. And God's saying, I'm not listening to your prayer. We saw the same thing in Yeshayahu. In Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, God says, I'm not listening to your prayer, not because you're not praying, not because you don't bring me sacrifices, not because you don't believe in God. It's because of your corrupt society, I can't allow you to remain my people. So let me get back to annotate and go back to my mouse. Okay. So that's his answer so far. And he's explaining why the temple was destroyed, because they didn't fix their society. Now let's continue. Oh, that's the end of the parak. I'm sorry. What did God do? And therefore I scattered them among the nations they never knew before. The land became desolate, no one passing by. What happened? A beautiful land turned desolate. Why there's a chapter break here? I guess the chapter's too long, but there's no reason for it, because Zechariah is continuing now in chapter 8. Chapter 7 and 8 is one continuous chapter, should be. Now he's giving the answer. That's why the first temple was destroyed. What needs to happen now? Pasuk bet. God's saying now I'm zealous. Don't say jealous. I'm zealous. Zealous for Zion means I'm quick. I'm quick to act. I really want this to happen. And God's saying I'm really behind these events. And this is what God says now. Kol mar Hashem, shafti el Tzion v'shachanti b'toch Yerushalayim. God's saying I'm returning now to Zion. I'm going to bring my Shekhinah. I'm going to dwell within the city of Yerushalayim. Jerusalem will be called the city of truth, and the Temple Mount, a holy site. Now, I'm going to suggest something here, which I'll prove as I continue reading. what God is saying here is a conditional promise. He's not saying I am bringing my Shekhinah back. I am returning. He's saying I can bring my Shekhinah back. I can return to Yerushalayim. On what condition? If Jerusalem is a city of truth. God can bring a Shekhinah, but God cannot make Jerusalem a city of truth. Only the people living there can make it a city of truth. And as we go on, we'll see this over and over again. It sounds like I'm pulling teeth here. In a couple lines, you'll see it's explicit. Kol Mar Shem Tzvot. This is a famous line. Someone mentioned, I think it's a song. Od yeshvus kenim uskenot berchavot Yerushalayim. Right now, remember, you're down and depressed, and it's only middle-aged people who came, and there aren't families there. Everything's backwards. There'll be a time soon coming that there'll be old people, old, grandparents, great-grandparents, sitting on benches on the streets of Jerusalem with their canes. They'll be walking with walking sticks and canes. And these old grandparents are going to be sitting and watching little children playing on the streets. There's a famous kikar in the old city called Batei Machsa in the old city of Jerusalem. And they have these psukim. There's a little playground where the kids play and a lot of benches where old people sit. And the psukim are right there. And this is a famous Nul of Zchari, which has been fulfilled too much. I just quoted Rabbi Mital's story. He would tell every year on Yom Ha'atzmaut, or whenever he gave a sikha. He survived the Holocaust, Rabbi Mital. And he used to tell the story, when he came to Israel after the Holocaust, for 5-10 years, he had not seen children. He hadn't seen older people. He just saw his work group he was with, people his age. He had not seen little children. He didn't see older people. And when he came to Israel, arriving after the Holocaust, and he saw little children running on the street, it just hit him. We would always quote this pasuk as like hitting him. All of a sudden, you see something alive. So we see from here how bad things are now, but how great things hope to be in the future. Now Issachar is going to continue what needs to happen for this to reach fruition. Pasuk Vav. Kol Mar Shem Tzvot. Ki palei beinei hasherit hamazeh b'yamim hahem gam einai yipalei b'ma Shem Tzvot. You think this is amazing? You think this could happen? God said, I'd also be surprised if it happens. It should be a marvelous thing, but it can happen. So basically, don't give up hope. And now comes the big line. Pasuk Zayin. Kol Mar Shem Tzvot. This is the word of God. Hineni Moshiach ami me'eretz Mizrach u'me'eretz Mavo Hashemes. God's saying, I'm behind these events. Remember our whole question: is this just political intrigue of the Persian Empire, or is God behind the Cyrus declaration? Is God behind Darius coming to power? Is God behind these political events? God's saying, I'm the one bringing my people back from the east and from the west. Eretz Mavo Hashemesh is the west. God's doing what's called kibbutz galuyot. God is enabling you to return. That's not by chance. That's God behind these events. I'm the one bringing them back. They can dwell in Jerusalem. I'll be their God. They'll be my people. That's Brit Milah, isn't it? That's Brit Sinai later. That's Brit Bechukotai. That's Brit Nitzavim. I'm sure you've seen that phrase before. It's the Brit, the core Brit of the Bible. I'm your God, you're my people. Now you're working for me. We have this eternal relationship, this Brit Olam, that I'm your God and you're my people. It manifests itself as Brit Sinai, and it's applied to the laws of the Torah, and it's supported by the Nevi'im as Jewish history unfolds. But that's the core concept of this Brit between God and the people. So it can happen, but on what condition? Bemetu b'tzedakah. Again, I want to see this as a caveat. Not that this is what God's doing, but what is God doing? God's bringing you back and enabling you to be my people, but it'll only happen if you do emet and tzedakah, if you do truth and righteousness. And now again, I'm reading into the psukim up until now. Now it's going to be explicit. Pasuk 10. Again, this is exactly the main topic of our whole series of King Cyrus, Lord Balfour. That's why I picked the title. The question is, how do you see the hand of God behind historical event? And that redemption is a two-way process. God can be behind historical events. That doesn't mean this is a redemption. It means it can be a redemption. But Am Yisrael has to do its part for it to happen. It's not that it's predetermined that redemption will happen in this year, but rather God can give us historical opportunities. It's up to us if it's going to be true redemption or not. And the main thing we need to do to make it redemption, at least Zechariah will give a very clear message. Okay. Kol Mar Shem Tzvot, pasuk that. Techezakni yidechem hashomim b'yamim eila tedvarim eila. This is exactly Chagai. Have chizuk. Remember we said that in Chagai, Chazak Am, Chazak Zerubbabel. That was in chapter 2 of Haggai. It says, everyone needs chizuk, everyone needs strength. People hearing this message from your Nevim, Mimpi Nevim, Asher b'yom yusad beit Hashem tzvot eichal Hashem libonot. The same message Haggai gave you on the day that we began construction of the second temple. Pay attention to those words and get chizuk. That's exactly chapter 2 of Haggai. We don't have time now, we're running late. Look in Haggai chapter 2. There's no that Cyrus quoting Haggai chapter 2, because that's Yom Yisud Heichal Hashem, word for word from there. Chizuk, all Perek Bet, all right there. Why? Before that time, Schar Adam Lo Niyah. That's exactly what Schar talked about. I mean, what Haggai talked about. No one can make a living. Things were a disaster. Remember, the economy was bad. No one can make a living. Everyone had given up hope. People went back to Bavel. They said, this is not time to build a house for God. And Haggai gave them, chizuk. Don't say we can't, just say we can. Pata, what's God saying now? Look, it's not like before. Before, when I was punishing you, I wasn't helping you. Now, God's saying, I'm zealous to help you. I'm doing as much as I can. That the land will give its fruit again. Like this is the brachot of Rabbi Yitzchak. I'm willing now. I'll make the land give its produce. You have rain at the right time. Your economy improve, and this nation can dwell in the land like it should be. Just like up until now, you were a disgrace in the eyes of the nations because you couldn't get off the ground and you were scattered among nations and you didn't have your sovereignty. Beit Yudah, Beit Yisrael. I'm willing now to help you. You'll be a blessing. Don't be afraid. Take the next step and move forward. Okay. Now he's going to develop this theme in totality. In totally. Pasuk Yudalid. This is the word of God. Just like I plotted, right, to do evil to you when your ancestors got me angry. When I brought the Babylonians in to punish you, you prayed to me, but I didn't listen to you. Why? I plotted them because I warned you and you didn't listen. I warned you over and over again, both in the time of Isaiah, before the Assyrians came in, and during the time of Yirmiyahu, in the time of Yoshiel, I warned you to improve your society. You didn't listen. And that's why I didn't listen to your prayers. I didn't change my mind. Okay? Just like I plotted and brought the Babylonians to punish you, came Shafti, Zamanti, B'meila, now I'm returning and I'm plotting now, in these days, Letivit Yerushalayim et Beit Yudah Tiro. That's again, he's saying again, I'm behind these events. I'm using this paragraph to prove everything we've been talking about and solving the questions that we had up until now. Now, this proves my point I've been saying all along. It's a two-way street. Here's what you need to do. Now you can't even fetch anymore. This is explicit. Here's what you need to do. Here's what God saying, here's what I'm doing. I'm returning. I'm plotting to help you. I brought in the Persians. I brought Darius to give you the okay. I'm willing to help your economy and everything. But what do you need to do? Dabru emet ishet re'eu. Here he goes again. Speak truth, man with his fellow man. Emet u'mishpat shalom shiftu b'sharechem. Justice and righteousness and truth and peace in the gates of your cities. And he continues, Vishet ra'at re'eu al tachshu b'avavchem. Don't plot against each other. Don't think evil things about each other. Don't play the blame game and the hate game, the sinat chinam game. Ushvat shek al tavu. Don't lie, and don't like lying and to cheat people. All these things are what God despises. God hates this type of behavior. And if you're returning, it's not enough to come and build a temple. It's not enough to come and be and thank God and bring sacrifices and pray to Him. It's if God blesses you with this prosperity, what do you do with your prosperity? The type of society you build, that's the core difference, whether this will be a full redemption or not. Now, no, how about fasting? Remember, Rabbi, we asked you a question, do we fast or don't we fast? You took advantage of the question to give us this whole rebuke. Now Zechariah gives the answer. And God says, here's the answer to your question. Oh, by the way, I will give you an answer. Here's the word of God about the fast days. You asked about fasting. The That's the fast of the 4th month, what we call Shiva Tammuz. V'tzoma Chamishi, what we call Tishvav, the fast of the 5th month. V'tzoma Shvi, the fast in the 7th month. V'tzoma Siri, the fast. Notice each month, each fast is named by the month because the date can change. It doesn't have to be exactly the 17th. In fact, I think it was on the 9th of Tammuz that the wall was breached. And Tzum Gedalia is always put off to after Rosh Hashanah. And Tishvav could be the 9th, 7th, 9th, or 10th, etc. Only a Asar B'Tevet has to be on a Asar B'Tevet. But these 4 fast days in these 4 months, what does he promise? Yeh lebeit Yehuda l'sason l'simcha l'modim tovim v'met v'shalom ahavu. What does he say? These 4 fast days will be for the house of Yehuda for sason and simcha. Not only won't they be fast days, they become holidays. Modim tovim. These fast days, not only won't they be fast days anymore, you can turn them into holidays. On what condition? If you love emet and shalom. Here's again the caveat. Based on what we said before, this isn't what it'll be, this is what needs to be. If you do emet v'shalom, if you love doing emet and shalom, and that characterizes your society, then there's no reason to fast. You were fasting not to remember what happened, but why it happened. And if you remember why it happened and internalize that and fix your ways, then there's no reason to fast because you were fasting to remember what went wrong and why it went wrong. Now that you've internalized what went wrong and you fixed your ways, the fast days can turn into holidays. Now comes, and that wasn't enough. Now he's going, what I call for a home run. Kol Hashem Tzvot. Not only going to return to quiet and peace and prosperity, Od asher yavo amim yeshvei arim rabot. There'll come a time soon, hopefully, if you fulfill this vision. And not just build your temple, but build that just society. And God will bless you and people return and redemption progresses properly. Not only will you come back to your land, other nations are going to come from different places. People say to one another, let's go together. Look at that phrase, to go and search the face of God, treat the favor of God, and look for God where? In Jerusalem. And I want to go also. There'll be groups of people, tour organizers, and groups of people, and all these different religious groups and national groups are going to come. And they want to visit Jerusalem and see this land, not just the temple, but the people that are living there. Amim Rabim, great nations will come. Great nations will come and look for God. Now, why is this so interesting? Where do we have this phrase, L'chalot et Pnei Hashem? Let me stop the share here and go back to the first source sheet I had. Where's my share screen? And we'll go to, here we go. Remember what the first question was? Here. The Nevuah began with a group of Jews from the exile coming L'chalot et Pnei Hashem, asking about fasting. What's the ironic answer says? If you internalize this message I'm giving you, and you return, if you come back from exile, build up Jerusalem, build the temple, and build a just society, then there won't be Jews coming to visit Jerusalem, but rather non-Jews will be coming to Jerusalem looking for guidance. So it began with Jews from the exile coming to ask a question from God. Do we fast or not? And it ends with, if you stop asking questions like that, but take action and return to Israel and build up that society and build a just society, non-Jews will be coming to Yerushalayim to look for guidance and direction. And now we get to what we saw before. And the fasting become holidays. Here. And we saw that. And then other nations were coming. Now the last line, I'll just quote from here. He said, understand Chalot Pnei Hashem in the beginning and the end? That closes up the whole Nevuah. But now there's one more add-on. Kol Hashem Tzvot. This is the word of God. B'yamim hahema, at that time, asher yachzichu 10 anashim mikol hashonot hagoyim, v'yachzichu b'chnaf Yehudi lemor nechem machem. What will happen? It will be so crowded in Jerusalem. Remember, with so many people coming to visit the city and see what's going on, there'll be 10 people waiting in line just to hold the corner of the knaf, of the corner of the garment, of an Ish Yehudi in saying, we want to follow you. We want to be inspired by you. We want direction from you. We look up to you. Okay? Things could be so great. That's how great the Second Temple could have been or could be. But on what condition? If we act in a way that sanctifies God. That's his message. Now, we're not going to talk about this now, but we're going to use this later on. I'll just give you a little promo. The phrase Ish Yehudi, we're going to find this phrase Ish Yehudi is going to be 2 times in all of Tanakh. Here's the Ish Yehudi, according to Zechariah, who should be in Yerushalayim, showing non-Jews and being example for non-Jews to connect to God in Jerusalem. And the next time we find the word Ish Yehudi in Tanakh is in what Megillah?
Esther.
Okay. And this Ish Yehudi who should be in Yerushalayim, where is he instead?
Shushan.
Which is the new Bira instead of Jerusalem. And for Marduk's sake, what's his name?
Ushmo Mordechai.
It's the name of a Babylonian god. But again, that's the share we'll do as we get towards Purim. But this would be the background to understand Megillat Esther, in my opinion. But that's I have to do that properly. We're almost out of time, so now I want to talk about who are the early prophets. I gave 2 models. Who are these early prophets who he's referring to? It could be Isaiah, it could be Yirmiyahu. And I'll bring a proof of both. First, let me prove from Yirmiyahu. Remember, we talked about doing justice and righteousness? It's not just to have a temple. So when Yirmiyahu gives his Nebuah, Yirmiyahu chapter 7, let me stop the share here and go to a Tanakh. I'll look at the questions in a second. Let me look at the chat real fast and see if I missed something. Respond. Okay, that's good. Oh, what year is Achashverosh? We're going to spend weeks on that. We'll leave that alone. Why don't they ask the question of the high priest? I don't think there's the high priest. You can only ask the high priest when there's Shekhinah. I'm not sure if they have Urim V'Tumim. You know, it's in the beginning of Vayit Sheni, the Shekhinah didn't. It's coming back, but it's not. They're not there yet. And again, the Urim V'Tumim is for questions about going to war and things like that. It's not questions of do you fast or not. That's his answer. But Urim V'Tumim is not a. That's not the thing. Ask question that you can answer by giving Musar. So we'll deal with all those questions later on. Let's get to Yirmiyahu. I want to show you that Zechariah's message is a message Yirmiyahu gave before the first temple was destroyed. And let's share my screen and go to my Tanakh. Yirmiyahu is here. Yirmiyahu chapter 7, Bible, Jeremiah chapter 7. If you're going to learn one chapter in the book of Yirmiyahu, it's this one. This is Yirmiyahu's Hashkafa. Again, we're looking for the message of why the first temple was destroyed. I'm just going to skip to the end, towards the end of the parak. He says as follows, Pasuk Gimel, because you've done all these bad things, and I warned you and you didn't listen, and I called upon you and you didn't answer. The same fate Shiloh had. Remember, Shiloh was destroyed in the time of Eli? Just like Shiloh was destroyed, so Jerusalem will be destroyed. There can be a destruction. I'm going to send you into exile, just like I sent the northern tribes into exile. Now, that's God's conclusion. But how does it begin, chapter 7? Listen who Yirmiyahu is saying this to. Hadavar shel Yirmiyahu beit Hashem lemor, amud b'shar beit Hashem v'krat Hashem et hadavar hazeh. Stand at the gate to God's house and call out this message to V'marta shimu dvar Hashem, listen to the word of God. Kol Yehuda habayim b'asher me'ela lishtachvot Hashem. This is a Musar statement that Yirmiyahu is giving to the people, not the irreligious people, to the religious people, the people coming to Shul, people coming to the Beit HaMikdash, people coming to daven to God, not just bring sacrifices, to praying to God, asking for his help, asking to give them prosperity, asking to help them with war against the Babylonians. They're begging for God's help. Okay, what's God answer? Kol mar Hashem tzvot Eloi Yisrael, heitivu darchechem u'maladechem. Improve your behavior and your ways. Then you want to remain here in this land and not go into exile? You want to remain here? You want to dwell? You want me to dwell with you here? Fix your ways. And don't put your trust. Don't listen to the false prophets who are saying all you need to do is pray in God's Heichal. He's making fun of the other prophets who are telling the people, if you want help, pray, daven harder, bring more sacrifices. Yirmiyahu says that's not enough. Ki, im hitiv tetiva darchechem, if you fix your ways, but maladechem, darchechem is what you're doing, maladechem is what you're thinking about doing. If you do justice and righteousness between, isn't Zechariah quoting Yirmiyahu? Word for word what Zechariah said. Don't oppress the strange orphan and widow. And don't cause innocent blood to be shed. And don't follow other gods. You see alluding to other gods and murder as well, but here the main emphasis here is going to be on social justice. Then you can dwell in this place, in the land that I've given to your forefathers. Then he says, all the second half of the Ten Commandments. You're stealing, you're murdering, adultery, swearing falsely, and Baal worship, okay, and following other gods. And then you come to my house, which is associated with my name, and you're doing it to say I'm safe. Your society is totally corrupt. And then you come to the Beit HaMikdash, ask God to help you. It says the Beit HaMikdash looks like a hangout for robbers, for criminals. My name and reputation is associated with this house, and the way you're acting inside does not allow me you to stay there. You can't be my people, but you act as my people in such a disgusting way. I can't allow you to continue to represent me. And therefore I have to take away the symbol that you're my people. He says, go take a teal to Shiloh, where I once dwelled, and look what happened to the Shiloh because of your bad behavior. Then he says again, because you did these terrible things, that's why I'm going to destroy the temple. Hope it's clear. So there's no doubt he's quoting here. There's no doubt that here, the Navi is quoting Yirmiyahu. But the vision about other nations coming, his vision about the last vision, where not only will God's Shekhinah return, but other nations come and visit you, that's Isaiah chapter, so we read Yirmiyahu 7, 1 through 24. Isaiah chapter 2, remember the famous one, the one that's outside the UN, on the Isaiah wall. What will happen at the end of time, or when in a messianic time when things are good? A time will come where other nations will come to Israel for guidance. That's there's no doubt that Zechariah is referring to this as well. So he's referring both to Yirmiyahu and to Yeshayahu. And when we talk about Nevi'im Rishonim, had you listened to them, he's referring to what we call Nevi'im Achronim, but not just Yirmiyahu, also Yeshayahu as well. He's combining both of their messages. And what we do, we'll be in the position of arbitration for other nations. We can give them guidance. And the famous line, we can cause people to take their plowshares, take their swords and turn them into plowshares. And the same thing, they'll take arms and use agricultural products. In the famous song, so I think my time's just about up. So I hope, let me just summarize real quick. What I try to show you is Zechariah's message is the reason for the fast days. And the fast days are basic times not to remember what happened, not just historical dates to commemorate, but remembering why it happened. And if we want the temple to be rebuilt, to be worthy of the temple being rebuilt, or worthy of God's Shekhinah being with us and redemption continuing, it's not what we pray, but primarily how we act in the society that we build and following the guidelines of the Nevi'im. That doesn't mean there's a need, you need to fast to remember that the main thing is not fasting. If you read the Haftarah we read on Yom Kippur from Isaiah chapter 58, it's the exact same message. We'll see, again, the prophets, they want prayer and they want fasting, that's good, but that's not the goal. That's a medium through which there has to be a transformative behavior, action that leads to better behavior. And when you only do the prayer without fixing your ways, that's when it becomes empty, and that's when God gets angry. Now, one last point, and then I'll take questions. We understand why the fast days won't be fast days if you're doing it right. What makes them holidays? So all the 4 fast days have a potential holiday involved. So Asar B'Tevet, we don't have time for. You have to read Yecheskel. But Asar B'Tevet, actually, I'll start with that because that's our topic. We didn't have time to get to Yecheskel. Maybe next week, after you've gone through Asar B'Tevet, we'll have time to look at it in Yecheskel itself. But remember, we talked about on the Hanukkah Shurim, the 8 days before the winter solstice and the 8 days after the winter solstice, the Midrash about Adam Rishon from Masechet Avodah Zarah Daf Chet. So the 8 days before the winter solstice, that's what we call Hanukkah. That's from the 25th, 24th, or 25th of Kislev until the second day of Tevet. From the second day of Tevet, another 8 days takes you to the 10th of Tevet. So the 10th of Tevet could be like the happy side of this winter, but it's the happy side of the Adam Rishon celebration. Now that things are getting, the days are getting longer, the nights are getting brighter, and the moon's out now. So that might be the meaning of the 10th day of the 10th month. That's one possibility. There's something also Kabbalistic about it, but we'll leave that alone. The other dates are neat because the 17th of Tammuz could have been the day that we received the first. It was the day we received the first luchot. Had we not sinned with the sin of the golden calf, that would have been the day of Matan Torah. That's the day that Moshe came down with the first luchot and all the laws on Har Sinai. Had we not sinned with the golden calf, we would have received the Torah, the rest of the Torah that day. That would have been a day, and the next day we would have moved on to Israel, maybe, or built the Mishkan. So, because that's the day Moshe broke the luchot, it could have been the day that we received the luchot. Tisha B'av in Tanakh is the day. If you do the cheshbon of the dates, Tisha B'av is the day the Meraglim came back. Remember that? They were there for 40 days. They left Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Rashi does the calculations. But if Tisha B'av is the day that the spies came back, had the spies come back, that's just what they came with a good report. Had they taken the good report and taken the challenge and gone into Israel, then Tisha B'av would have been the day that we enter or begin our conquest of the land of Israel. It would have been maybe like a Yom Ha'atzmaut kind of day. But because the sin of the spies, we lost that day. So we have 3 holidays now. But that's the 3, and we're missing one. Oh, and Tzum Gedalia is Rosh Hashanah anyhow. So it's already a holiday. So Tzum Gedalia is happening on Rosh Hashanah. So Tzum Gedalia is already a holiday. Shiva Sabbatamuz would be Yom Matan Torah, and Tisha would be Yom Ha'atzmaut, and Asar B'Tevet is, we'll call it the winter solstice holiday. Okay. So on the halachic side, we get time to Gemara. The Gemara brings, of course, is aware of all this. And what's the conclusion of the Gemara? The Gemara's conclusion is Rotzu mitanin, rotzu ein mitanin. The halachic answer is it's up to you. Halach's answer is Am Yisrael decides. He says, in the time of when we're in trouble, in exile, and under trouble and distress, of course we fast. If we're in the land of Israel and the Mashiach's here and everything's great, we don't fast. If we're in Israel but it's not complete, then we decide. Rotzu mitanin, rotzu ein mitanin. If you want, you can fast. If you want, you don't. But the halachic answer is it's up to Am Yisrael. We decide. And that's why the question came up after thing. But that's also again the Gemara about what's called rotzu mitanin, rotzu ein mitanin. That's more ask your local rabbi how to understand that sugya. We paskin that we fast, but we talk about when's the fast over, or what are you going to do? Some places have educational programs on fast days. Some people do that, like Torah in Motion, but other people just talk about the fasting side. Okay. Yeah,
a comment.
By the way, we have time to show it. Always has
Is
to be
it
on
true
the
that
Just let Rabbi Leibtag go through the comments on the screen, on the chat box, and then we'll take people can unmute.
Questions. Okay.
I'll just quickly go through. It's not that many. Then people can unmute themselves and ask.
Go ahead, Jay. Go ahead and read them to me.
I should read them to you.
I mean, just remind me because I didn't look at them yet.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Fine. Yeah. Okay. Why did they teach the first temple was destroyed? Because of idol worship and immorality. If that's not the reason.
I can't. I wish I could. That's an educational question.
Next year, we'll spend the next 5 years analyzing that question. That's we always like to ritualize ethics. I mean, that's
it's a lot easier to say the temple was destroyed because we were serving other gods or we were committing murder as opposed to build a just society.
Right.
It makes you feel less guilty. Yeah.
That's what I mean. The rituals are always easy. Okay. Who came first? Which came first? Megillat Esther or Zechariah?
That'd be about 5 classes.
Okay, there we go. We got lots of stuff to keep going. Why do you think these prophecies are halakhic, rabbinic, and not just flowery language? Why should it be that way? I know the early rabbis, Chazal, look for something to hang their rulings on. You want to say it's an asmachta. So look at what became
That's Rabbi's whole approach, whether when the rabbis give halakhic ruling based on psukim, or the psukim, it's called midrash miyatzer, or midrash. Right. Is the midrash coming to explain the psukim, or the midrash using the psukim? The halacha makes sense, and I'm using the halacha is based on common sense or logic or rabbinic logic, and then I need a pasuk to hook it to remember it.
That's in general, right? I know
that applies to this as well, but that's in general. And both are true. Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other way.
Yeah, of course. Sarah David, a link to the
And-
Septuagint, right? You didn't get into the whole thing, the translation of the Bible. That's a whole other thing. The 3-day fast day the rabbis instituted on the 8th, 9th, and 10th of Tevet.
Oh, that's something else. That's 7th, 8th, and
Right,
9th.
that's a separate issue.
I have a nice
In
quote
the
on that,
Slicha-
but not,
I'm
I have a
sorry?
nice, we'll do it next week.
Next week. Okay, very good. Okay. Now,
But
Rochelle,
the death of Sofer relates to the Second Temple period, right?
I'm sorry?
The death of Ezra Sofer, one of them, relates to the
Yes.
Second Temple period. Tugum the Torah Yavanit relates to the Second Temple period. That's the Greek time period. It's Tamai. And Asar B'Tevet for sure relates to it based on what we just saw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Rochelle, you want to ask now? People can ask orally. Just mention, as I mentioned at the
Okay.
beginning of this year, next week
All right.
and moving forward, it's more convenient for Rabbi Leibtag. I believe we're going to start to share at 11:15. So I hope that's okay. I'll send out emails, but just mark that on that moving forward. We're going to switch 15 minutes later. I hope that's okay for everybody. And if not, you'll listen to the last 15
They
minutes.
should write down 11:10 so that people will be on by 11:15.
No. We 11:15. We can't tell people to come early or late or whatever. Okay. Now, Rochelle, you can ask your question. I think you had a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
My brother always used to say, if David were to come out on Shabbat, you'd still have to fast on a Sarah David. It wouldn't be a nidche.
Yeah, not
You
it's
have
not just your brothers. Abu Darham says that in the Shulchan Aruch, in this commentary on the Beit Yosef. He says they worked out the calendar. The rabbis were pretty smart, and they're 19 years, when they cycled the calendar, they made sure that just like they cited Shabbat Miketz would almost always be Shabbat Chanukah, except for once or twice in a cycle. They made sure that Asar B'Tevet would never come out on Shabbat. Now, why? Because that's a pasuk in Yecheskel. As long as I have the source sheet on it, but here in Yecheskel it says on that day in the he says, write down this day. Ktov et shem etzem hayom hazeh. Ktov lecha et shem hayom et etzem hayom hazeh. Write down this day on the what? On the 10th month, the 10th day, the 10th month. Mark down the day on this very day. Here's what happened. So because of this pasuk at etzem hayom hazeh, this very day, mark down the date. So that's the source they use. Why? That's the date, and you can't change it. Okay, that's it.
The last time,
He always used to make that.
That's a quote.
He always made that comment.
Yeah, that's from the Abu
the
Dhabi.
last time he came,
But
was
by
not
the way,
Shabbat Hanukkah was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Is there a link between
yeah,
the birth of Jesus and Asara B'Tevet?
Not that I know of. Maybe someone thinks there might be.
Thursday night, Mark Shapiro will probably talk about that. I'm not sure. This Thursday night, we're having a special shiur, learning Torah on Christmas Eve.
Oh,
And
I see. I see what you mean, Nick. That goes back to Adam Arusha and the 8 days and the 8 days. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, I believe, Mark once wrote an article about this. I don't know exactly what he's going to say, but my guess is he'll address that question. That'll be this Thursday.
We talked about that. It started with Saturnalia being a Roman pagan holiday, and the early Christians moving it.
Yes.
When the Roman Empire became Christian, they couldn't get rid of Saturnalia, so they moved Jesus' birth to that. But once they're doing that, the 8 days, another 8 days, if that's when he's born, the 8th day is going to be his bris or something. So it goes back to that midrash of Adam Arishon with 8 days before the solstice and 8 days after the solstice. So if they're going to move his birth there, it's not something historical, but it's their midrashim, which fit nicely with our Masorah.
Rabbi,
We keep first.
Rabbi, is your point about the issue Hudi that he wasn't Jewish and is now coming back to Yerushalayim?
No, I didn't say that.
Or the other
I'm
way
saying-
around, that he was first, it's sad that he was Yerushalayim and now he's in Shushan. What was your point about the
No,
issue?
but we're going to do in class, I'm going to show you that when you read Megillat Esther, you can read Megillat Esther by itself. If you read Megillat Esther with Zechariah Perek Zayin Chet in your background, and that's just all Sefer Zechariah and Chagai, and everything we're doing in this, everything we've been studying, is if you're aware of the time period, the challenge, what could it have been? You understand? We just read, this is the last prophecy that the people in exile here, before Megillat, if Megillat Esther is when it is historically, the time of Xerxes, after Dayavesh, then when I read Megillat Esther, the whole Megillah is a satire yelling at the people for not returning.
Right.
Yeah, so we're gonna need to explain that we need. If you don't know your Sefer Zechariah, you'll never catch it. If you know your Zechariah, you can't miss it. That's what I want to show
So
you.
you're really saying it's sad that the issue do should be in Shalayim is really in Shushan. That is that.
Yeah, it's sort of it's ironic. Yeah,
Okay, thank
even
you.
though we read it nice and proud, but that pasuk is full of sarcasm.
Thank you very much. Kol hakavod.
All right, any other questions? If not, oh,